You remember that song? Let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me. Let's talk about all the good things and all the bad things that can be. Unfortunately, for many Christian single women, there's not a space or a place where they're able to talk about things like abstinence or sexual compatibility, or even when they get in marriage, right? How do I tell him the things that I like, want, need, and desire? And so I get a lot of questions in my comments from women as it relates to sex, sexual boundaries. How do I have a conversation with him? How do I determine whether we are compatible? And I really believe that they're coming onto YouTube and asking me these questions, right? Because I talk about sex openly, but also whether it's their family, friends, or their local assembly, they're not able to have open and honest conversations about sex. We have to understand that we are, sexual beings, and God created sex, right? So there should be no shame, there should be no embarrassment, and I really believe there should be no minimization as it relates to you being sexually curious, whether you're a virgin or you're not. Whatever questions you have about sex, I believe the church should answer them. And the reason why I believe the church should answer your questions about sex is because if they can tell you that the bedroom is undefiled, if they can tell you not to deny your husband, they should be able to have conversations with you about sexual boundaries and safety and the things like that that are very important to you. So I'm gonna go ahead. One of the Heal Squad members asked me a question. It is a meaty question. I'm going to break it down. I really believe before you take advice as it relates to sex from anyone, that you have to ensure that they have a healthy view and relationship with sex. I was watching just a clip of a podcast, and the question about sexual compatibility came up, and the woman said sexual compatibility is not even biblical, so we can move on. That is not a person that I would take advice as relates to sex from. Why? Because there are many things that the Bible or holy text may not cover, but Song of Solomon's is in the book, or Song of Songs, depending on what version of the Bible you have. It's very clear that those two were sexually compatible. The way that young lady talked about that man, listen, she was very sexually aroused and interested in him. But I also believe, as it relates to church, that there is a lot of shame, there's a lot of guilt related to sex. There are some people who are nervous and they are taboo about having conversations about sex. There could be even this, I don't want to tempt you, but we have to have open and honest conversations. So let me get in and read what this young lady said. So she left this comment on why men pull away after intimacy. And she said, ascertaining sexual compatibility as an abstinent or celibate person when you are already in a committed relationship. In this video, you mentioned that Christian girlies lack practical skills to navigate certain issues. I'd like to know if there's any way to ascertain sexual compatibility when you're abstinent, celibate, or waiting until marriage. I'm a big fan of abstaining. However, I've not seen any religious leaders give decisive solutions on how to ascertain sexual compatibility when you're abstaining. Some will say that by hugging him, you will know if the particulars are functioning because he will get worked up. However, that doesn't mean he doesn't have ED or that he'd want intercourse as often as you and vice versa. Most times when women bring up desiring sexual compatibility, they are made to feel wayward. Let me answer that part right there as it relates to feeling wayward. I believe that women are not treated or seen as sexual beings. The messaging that I received growing up was heavily focused on the man being sexually satisfied, right? I think that's why some women, especially those are married, or it's even taught that it's a marital duty as relates to the wife. You as a woman, even if you are a virgin, you know what feels good to you versus what doesn't feel good to you. And when you are discussing compatibility, I believe that you should, even if you are a virgin, you're like, I don't know exactly what sex feels like, so I can't give a clear answer as to what I like. But what I do know is I want to be honored and respected. I want you to have sex with me and not on me. which is very different. Those are the type of things that come up and when I am working with someone as it relates to how do I navigate being abstinent, or how do I navigate moving this relationship forward? Because not every Christian is waiting to have sex. And I think that's another conversation we have to have. I've mentioned the Pew Research article, and I'm going to put it down below, where it said that one of them, 56% of Christians stated that it was okay to have sex within a committed relationship. So when a woman is talking about sex, it's seen as taboo. She may be accused of being a Jezebel, accused of being fast, because as it relates to purity culture and how women are seen and viewed, it's not okay, right? It's not proper for a woman to talk about sex and her desires, how she wants to feel when she's having sex, what she wants to experience. That's not the case. What often happens is the expectation is you are supposed to have sex with your husband, you get married, and you guys figure it out. But if the church is going to be very definitive on, you shouldn't deny your husband. I've heard people in church say, like the lady I mentioned before, I don't think sexual compatibility is not biblical, so we don't need to talk about it. Or sex is just for procreation, or, no sex toys, oral sex is unnatural, so you can't have that. The only type of sex that you should have is missionary. There are churches that have a whole lot of conversation about sex, but they don't have it in the lens of it being pleasurable for women. I've mentioned this, the orgasm gap, right? 70% of women don't have orgasms as it relates to penetrative sex. So even as it relates to sexual compatibility, you're going to have to ask questions about the things that he's comfortable with and what you're comfortable with. The frequency of sex, even if you're a virgin, how often do you think you want to have sex? And as women, we have to have conversations from when you get married on about what's happening in your body, how you're feeling. Is emotional safety and emotional intimacy important to you? Because for many women, emotional intimacy is very important. And for some marriages or for some long-term relationships, when emotional intimacy is absent, when emotional intimacy is absent, then it impacts sex, okay? And we also, what she goes into later, she said, now let me talk about physical health. Physical health is also something that impacts sex. If you're a woman going through perimenopause, one of the Heal Squad members is an NP, and she's specializing in perimenopause. And as soon as she gives me the red light, I'm going to share her information with you, because I am a fan of HRT, and so as you go through perimenopause, your testosterone may decrease. That impacts your libido, but also when your estrogen decreases, that impacts your, I don't know if I can say it, your vagina. I'm gonna say it, they may flag me, your vagina, okay? And so in your marriage, these are type of things that you're going to talk about. You're going to talk about, menopause has an impact on sex. It has an impact on if you're able to lubricate and those things. And so we have to be willing to have conversations about sex, very clear conversations about sex. Sex changes after you have children. There's Marcus D. Wiley talked about when his wife met her sexual peak, and he was like, I know God didn't do this to me. Woo! But we don't focus on that. We don't focus on women having higher sex drives than their partners. But you have to be willing to have an open conversation about this. And let me invite you here. If there is a question as it relates to sex that you haven't found an answer to, I want to share 2 resources with you. But I also want to say, hey, put it down below, and maybe next month in August, or from now until August, I'll do videos about sex. So this is the first resource. I read this book. It's by Dr. Gail Wyatt. She is, I believe, a psychologist. Stolen Women is Reclaiming Our Sexuality, Taking Back Our Lives. And there are 3 categories that she talks about as it relates to women. She talks about the mammy, right? I grew up Church of God in Christ, and I know who Mammy is. You think of her as the maid from Gone with the Wind, right? She is not seen as a sexual being. And then the other woman she talked about would be the one that you characterize as Jezebel. And this is a woman that, is seen as like a sex vixen. And there is a lot of characteristics as it relates to women, and there are beliefs that we have about ourselves, and we are having sex through the beliefs. And there's a lot of shame that women experience as it relates to sex. But you should be able to be free, whether you as a sexual being that's a single woman, but also in your marriage. So I like this book. The other book I want to give you is Sensual Faith. This book right here is so good. This is by, she has her master's in divinity and also theology, and her name is Yvonne Briggs or Lavon Briggs. You also can follow her on Instagram. Another resource I want to give you is what is her name? Brittany Brodus. She is a Christian sexologist, and she is also on YouTube and Instagram. I want you to read these books. I want you to follow these ladies. I want you to explore sex. You are a sexual being. It is a part of your life. It's going to be a part of your marriage. I really believe that there are many women that are struggling as it relates to sex in their marriage, and they don't want to have open and honest conversations. Why? Because again, conditioning is that sex is for the man, it's not for you. There are many women, sex should not be painful for you. It should be pleasurable, but they see it as it's for him, so they don't have a conversation, or they don't want to be seen as a loose woman. There's a lot of judgment that some men have. Even if the wife has had a sexual history, they will judge her for that. You're going to have to overcome all of that if you want to have a healthy sexual experience and relationship. But also there's some work that your partner, your husband may have to do. You are a sexual being. Your needs matter. You should have an orgasm. Okay? You should be able to have an orgasm. And the two of you should be able to work together for it to be pleasurable. I've also heard comments like, well, if you hadn't had sex before, then you wouldn't know whether it's pleasurable or not, whether it's good or not. This young lady right here, chef's kiss. This is what she said. One doesn't need to have eaten peach cobbler before to know that the one they're eating is ill prepared or well prepared. Come on with the analogy. You listen, if somebody presents a meal to you and it don't look good, it don't smell good, you're not going to eat it. You're not going to want it. And this doesn't have to be that this person is sexually skilled and knowledgeable. It has to be with, do we have the same values as it relates to sex? Will he respect my boundaries? If it's a no, if it's a yes, if I want to explore, will he respect that? Will I respect his boundaries? And something that I want to bring in as a trauma therapist is that it's really, if you've experienced trauma, there is sex therapy out there that will help you. But it's really important that going back to what I said initially, it's very important that you're mindful of who you're getting information from, because that person may be speaking through their trauma. One thing that young lady said in that podcast is like, I really don't think it's important. I would be interested in knowing why. But being a trauma therapist, let me give you some statistics as it relates to trauma, especially for women, because this is why, in my opinion, it's very important. And this is from, let me tell you who this is from, and I'll put this down below, the National Sexual Violence Resource Center. 1 in 5 women in the United States experience a completed or attempted rape during their lifetime. Nearly a quarter of men in the U.S. experience some form of contact sexual violence in their lifetime. So 20% of women. But let me go down to this. 1 in 3 female victims of completed or attempted rape experienced it for the first time between the ages of 11 and 17. So 33, right? That's 33%. About 1 in 4 male victims of completed or attempted rape experienced it between the ages of 11 and 17. In 2018, it's estimated that 734,630 people were raped, including threatened, attempted, or completed. The prevalence of false reporting for sexual assault crimes is low, between 2 and 10%. And there's this there is this inclination that when somebody says that something happened to them, that we don't believe them. 2 to 10%. About half of female victims of rape reported being raped by an intimate partner. and 40% by an acquaintance. I tell my clients all the time, it's not stranger danger. It's who you're in relationship with. Now, if someone has a sexual trauma and they do not have a healthy relationship with sex, the information that they give you is going to be through the lens of their trauma. And that may be a person who's hypersexual, because we see that as well, versus someone who is a sexually avoidant. We have to address the minimalization of sex, especially pleasurable sex for women in church. You should be able to have conversations about sex. Now, some people will say, don't talk about it too much because you don't want to be tempted to have sex. Some will say, wait until you're engaged in order to have it with your premarital counselor, so that, you're not tempted to have sex. Sex is seen as taboo in the church. And it's seen that you don't want to be tempted. You don't want to fall. And while I understand that, it is an important part of a marriage, don't allow anyone to minimize it, okay? Now, going back to physical health, I really believe that you should talk about your physical health, because that we also have to understand that some people are more sexual than others. So this young lady being concerned about ED, maybe she's dated someone in the past, maybe she was getting ready to be married to someone in the past, and they didn't share that with her, okay? So not just ED, but also you as a woman need to be aware of, are you able to be aroused, right? And what I mean by that, because even if you're a virgin, you can see a man, does it turn you on? Now, I'm not saying to be lustful towards him. The other day, I looked out my window. There was a man outside, because there's a walking path near my window. And I said, oh, Lord, keep me near the cross, Jesus. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Created in your image and likeness, God. Wait a minute. Huh? Let's be for real. Okay. What he said, like Romeo and Juliet. Okay. So you want to ask questions. I don't think you necessarily have to wait until you're engaged. I think you can have a conversation about this pre-engagement, about how frequently would you like to have sex? Are there any health conditions, high blood pressure, diabetes, that will impact our sex life? There's nothing wrong with that. She goes on to say this. In the same vein, we all have different sexual appetites, and it is important to be with someone who is sexually compatible as well. Now this is the discrepancy. When women end up with a man with a lower sexual appetite, they are shamed for wanting more sex. That goes back to you being a Jezebel. And are reminded that sex is not everything. And there are women that push that forward, that notion forward. When a man ends up with a woman with a low sexual appetite, the woman is advised to keep up or lose her man. It's very true. And there are women that are advised that, are asked after their postpartum, are you tending to your wifely duties? Are you taking care of your husband? There's no consideration for her emotional health, her physical health, the transition of we're having this child, I'm breastfeeding, I'm sleep deprived, I'm touch deprived, there's no consideration for that. These are the type of questions that you should be asking your partner before you get married. Listen, if I'm postpartum or I'm going to, or I just don't want to have sex, how are you going to navigate that? Because there are some men that feel like once they get married to you that they're entitled to your body. So you also not just have to have a conversation about sexual compatibility, but also, do you feel entitled to my body? If I say no, right? Some people will say, well, you've become one. It's two and they become one. Okay, and we're one and he wanted it and I don't. How do we navigate that? How do we navigate that? Okay? So I think that right there, it's a double standard. And there must be a conversation about it, especially when some men may go outside of the marriage, not justly, and have an affair. We've seen many times in media where, especially in the church, where there are men that are talking about affairs that they had. That impacts the quality, that impacts the marriage, not the quality, that impacts the marriage, that impacts safety and trust. And that also has to do with sexual compatibility, in my opinion. You need to have a conversation about safety. You need to have a conversation about trust. I am trusting you with my body. You having sex, you're being vulnerable. That's the most intimate act that you can have with another person. And so I don't see there's anything wrong with having these types of conversations. She said, when you're outside of marriage talking about the importance of sexual compatibility, you are shamed and called loose. Once you get married and complain about it, you're encouraged to endure because there is more to life than the horizontal tangle. For context, I'm African and spent most of my life in Africa before moving to the West. Some of the things I've itemized here are concerns I heard whispered by married African women and men in church. Some regret waiting until marriage because of the persistent sexual dissatisfaction. That's their current reality. Others have accepted this sexual dissatisfaction as their cross and as evidence that marriage is not about happiness, but rather holiness. The whole thing just unsettles my soul, and I really love to hear your thoughts. So this is what I think as it relates to being sexually dissatisfied. I believe just like in any area, right? You work to getting to the place where it satisfies the both of you. You both may have different values or habits as it relates to finances. You both will have different beliefs as it relates to rearing children. There will be some things that you agree on, but there will be others. I believe as it relates to being sexually compatible, it takes two people to listen to each other. It takes two people to be caring about what the other person needs and not minimizing that person needs, not dismissing that person needs, but saying this is important to this person who I love, I care, and I have said before God and everybody else that I'm going to forsake all others. And I really want us to be successful in this area. I want us to have sex like they talking about in Song of Solomon. I want us to have sex like that's very passionate. However you want to have sex. I want to have sex where there's safety, where I know that I can be vulnerable with this person and they're not judging my body and how I look. And I just want to be able to explore. I want sex where there is freedom. That is the type of conversation that you should be able to have both in church and with the person. So I hope this answers your question. I'm going to do a couple of more videos as it relates to sex because the girlies have questions about sex and I'm here to answer them. All of the resources will be connected down below in the description, along with the information from Pew, that study, and the statistics. You need to learn about sex from a healthy source. You need to not feel shame because you are interested in sexual compatibility. Like anything, like when she talked about being happy versus holy, relationships require work, right? But the type of work that it requires, I believe, shouldn't be burdensome, okay? This is Heal the New Sexy. My name is Smithia.